Is the Bassmaster Classic and tournaments like it ruining every fishery it touches? And is it killing all of your largemouth bass? Well, the answer to that, to a large extent, is yes. Now look, I've fished professionally for a very long time. I fished on every continent except Antarctica through my military service. I've commercially fished. I fished a ton of tournaments, both saltwater and freshwater. I continually fish with tournament anglers. I've wrote the book on fishing to help you catch more fish. And I have to say, I am continually shocked at how much openly the Bassmaster Classic and tournaments like it are so concerned with the money and so openly not concerned with the health of the fisheries nationwide. And we're going to talk about that and go through it step by step in this video. And so the elephant in the room, of course, is the bag weigh-ins at the end of each day of these tournaments, right? It's ridiculous in this day and age that we still have these massive tournaments kind of doing this. And well, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out how you're negatively impacting these fisheries. So in this particular instance, these boats had to be on Ray Roberts Lake at 07:30 in the morning or 7:30 a.m. in the morning, and they had to be off the water at 3:30 p.m. So that means if you're out there and you catch a big old hog, you know, and you put it in the live well, because you have to weigh that fish in at the end of the day. And it is a ridiculous process. By the way, this tournament was won on staging areas for pre-spawn bass. So the bass that are being caught, thanks to forward-facing sonar, by the way, we'll cover that a little bit later too. These are your biggest females in the lake, right? The females that are going to move up and spawn, now you're taking them out of their pre-spawn areas, their staging areas. You're putting them in a live well. Again, let's say at 8:30, you're fishing with them in the live well all day to 3:30. By the way, I don't know if you ever fished tournaments before. Leave a comment below if you did. But when you drive around spot to spot, or you're fishing to that last possible minute to catch that big fish, you are not taking your time and driving back at a slow bell back to the boat ramp to get your boat and get to the weigh-in, right? You're just kind of like, well, you know, Miss Daisy, I know I got fish in the live well, I'm going to take it easy on her. No, you're pulling that throttle down, getting that boat up on plane and just beating the tar out of those fish all day inside of that live well. I got to give credit to Randy Blockhead here. He shared a story on his YouTube channel where, you know, it was a rough day and he did that. And again, these are bag weigh-ins, the Bassmaster Classic for forever. And he just beat the hell out of those fish and he had all the fish scales on the bottom of his live well. So credit to him. He shoots straight. I really enjoy his feedback on some of this stuff. And yeah, so now you get back to the boat ramp with this beat to tar fish here. Maybe missing scales, maybe not. I don't know. And then now you got to drive an hour to Fort Worth to go through that ridiculously long weigh-in process where those fish are in that live well or some form of well of water. I don't know if they're changing the water. I don't know the dynamics behind it because nobody wants to talk about it because there is a huge amount of fish kill here. I'm sure of it. And then they weigh in the fish and then they got to put them back in the live wells. They got to drive them back to the lake. The drive, I believe, was over an hour, maybe an hour, somewhere around there. And then they're releasing those fish to die a little bit later. Okay, that's a terrible process, especially for a tournament organization that is just raking it in. I mean, this is the World Series of largemouth bass fishing, and nobody has figured out a way to not just beat the hell out of these fish, weigh them up and keep them out of the lake for that heavy amount of time. Next day they hit the water, they do the same thing. Now let's talk about forward-facing sonar here and how this is making the situation even a million times worse. So in spite of the fact that there's this ridiculous concept of removing the fish and having to weigh them in an hour away and throughout this whole day of a long process for the fish, which inevitably they're dead, right? Statistics show that anywhere from 20% to 70% of these fish may die after you release them. Again, there's different studies out there, different numbers. A large part of these fish are dying, okay? So now you take forward-facing sonar, and one of the comments made during the tournament was, so-and-so fisherman is not going to throw to a fish that's under 5 pounds. And what that means is they can literally see the fish on forward-facing sonar and know exactly how big they are. And of course, they're only going to target the big females. Again, this is right before spawn, right? So now only the biggest fish are actually being thrown to because of, again, I like Randy Blockett, what he calls the cheater box. Whether you think it's a cheater box or not, go ahead and leave me a comment below. But the point is, the fact that these guys are able to target these big hogs, right? These 8-pound bass, your breeding fish, the fish that you want their genes being put into the gene pool of your lake for the health of the lake, are now only being targeted and being removed and driven down the road and being weighed in and then being driven back. You can see where this is damaging to your lake and environment. Now, forward-facing sonar is being used on all of these boats. All of these tournaments are being won by forward-facing sonar because they're targeting only the biggest fish, because they could see the fish. They could see them and they could follow them around the lake and they can entice them to bite. And by the way, at this time of year in these lakes, you need those fish to be healthy for the spawn. If you have a post-mortality rate of a big old 8, 9, 10-pound hog, that is terrible. That's your big breeding females. Every saltwater regulation out there nowadays is based around protecting the breeding females. There's caps on the fish that you can keep. If you catch, a 45-inch striper, you have to throw it back. You cannot keep it and kill it because that is your breeding female. But for some reason, a tournament that rakes in so much money just can't seem to figure this out. And for some reason, not a lot of people like to talk about this. So now, the fact that forward-facing sonar is just making this 10 times worse. If you want to know some studies behind forward-facing sonar and how that's destroying other fisheries all around the country, go ahead and click on this video right here. We're actually digging into a scientific report about forward-facing sonar, and let me know what you think about that. So thanks for tuning in, Fish Lots. I'll see you out there on the water.